Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Those here at the United Nations Climate Change Conference here in Glasgow, and those who watch us online. And welcome to the Arctic 2050, the panel discussion on the future of the Arctic. My name is Alexei Kalinin. I am the head of the Institute for Emerging Market Studies at Skolkovo School of Management, and I will be facilitating the discussion today. So, the Arctic is beautiful, and as every beauty is fragile, the climate change affects it the most. And we can see that, it's evident and it's obvious when we see the Arctic ice melting. We can tell that the global temperatures are rising, and it's evident and it's obvious. But today, we would like to take you beyond the obvious. The climate change is obvious, unlike its consequences. The damage it makes is obvious, unlike the opportunities it brings. Today, we would like to talk strategically about the opportunities for the Arctic in 2050. The Arctic is the home to 10 million people, mostly urbanized, but also with an important share of the indigenous peoples. What their livelihoods will depend upon in 2050. Today, the Arctic economy is significantly skewed towards oil and gas. But how will it look like in 30 years' time with energy transition in the agenda and the climate change awareness growing? How the Arctic can become a global food supplier? What can we learn from the indigenous people's sustainable coexistence with the Arctic Ocean? What needs to be done to save the ocean and at the same time use its full economic potential? These and many very similar questions are in focus today. And with this, I would like to introduce our panelists and give a start to the discussion. So today we have Alexandra Middleton, Assistant Professor of Oulu Business School at the University of Oulu. Hello, Alexandra. Good to see you. We have Frode Nielsen, who is Professor of Marketing and Doctor of Economy in Nord University Business School. We also have Mads Frederiksen, who is a Director at Arctic Economic Council. Welcome all of you. And we are also expecting Gun-Britt Retter, Head of Arctic and Environmental Unit at Sami Council, who will join us later. And perhaps there will be a couple more panelists who are somewhere here on other sessions, and they will probably join us during the session. And we are looking forward to welcoming them here as well. So with this, I would like to give the floor to Alexandra Middleton. So Alexandra, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon on my behalf to everyone. When we talk about the Arctic, we usually assume time horizon of 15, 20 years. But when we try to anticipate how the Arctic is going to look in 2050, it suddenly becomes a much more challenging exercise. Nord University, in collaboration with Skolkovo Moscow School of Management, with the support from the EEI, released a report in winter 2021, presenting 4 scenarios of Arctic development. Researchers considered 2 critical uncertainties. One is quality of institutional environment, and another is the pace of technology and innovation for the Arctic needs. Scenarios considered 3 pillars of sustainability: social, environmental, and economic ones. For instance, in one scenario called romanticism, the Arctic is only considered to be like a picture for National Geographic, where only environmental dimension is developed, whereas social and economic ones are underdeveloped. And the Arctic becomes depopulated. In the Renaissance scenario, we have all three pillars of sustainability emphasized, where economy, people, and environment all thrive in well-functioning, institutional, sustainable standards of doing business in the Arctic, with the use of the best available technology and innovation. I encourage you to read more about the scenario work on website arctic2050.info. Yes, when we talk about certainties of the Arctic development, we know for sure about climate change urgency, because we see it already now. Arctic is the fastest changing environment. We have warming Arctic, we have permafrost thaw, ice and snow is disappearing. There's also changes in the ocean and the ice sea environment that generate major unknowns and uncertainties in the Arctic. They will affect food systems, food security, oceans, natural diversity, and local communities. In the next research, we are focusing on the Arctic Ocean economy. Because the Arctic is to the large extent the ocean, the UN declared the 20s a decade for ocean science for sustainable development, and it would be held from 21 to 2030. The decade will provide a common framework to ensure that the ocean science can fully support countries to achieve their Agenda 2030 or Sustainable Development Goals. When we already know that ocean contributes to $25 trillion and also absorb 30% of CO2. The ocean economy, as we understand it, is a multitude of activities. It's fisheries and fish processing, use of marine living resources for the production of pharmaceutical products, fertilizers, and chemical additives. There's also maritime transportation, logistics, shipbuilding, global trade, and offshore energy, and not to forget about tourism. Arctic Council has already worked on this issue and has released a report called Blue Economy. And there, the blue bioeconomy is considered very important to the Arctic communities because it provides food and other valuable bioresources. It generates value, employment, and supports rural regions. The blue ecosystem in the Arctic is undergoing unprecedented changes, and they all result from the climate change. The oceans are becoming warmer, and we don't know how this will affect the food production from the oceans. I can also mention that Arctic Economic Council has worked on this issue, and they have a Blue Economy Working Group that aims to facilitate a pan-Arctic alliance of ocean clusters that will bring together knowledge and expertise, and also cluster funding instruments throughout the regions that there will be product development and economic growth in that sector. And now I'd like to share some examples that already exist from the ocean economy, from blue economy. In Norway, we have very large scale offshore wind farm that completely functions without any government subsidy. In Finland, there is a new initiative launched called Team Renewable Arctic Finland, and it brings together 22 major players that bring together stakeholders, investors, businesses, technology, and service providers for creating a competitive offshore domain expertise in the scalable and global export potential for this offshore renewable energy sector with the Arctic twist, with the use of Arctic know-how, innovation, and technologies. And next sector that I'd like to highlight is sustainable Arctic tourism. On one hand, Arctic tourism is very challenging because if we have uncontrolled tourism, it will have very drastic effects on the fragile ecological systems of the Arctic, and especially on those that are located in the tundra area. There's also danger of breaking historical and cultural environment in the Arctic. But if it's done sustainable, following the best practice possible, it can be essential for development of Arctic human capital, for bringing population to the Arctic. But when traveling to national parks sustainably means that this will also upkeep them, provide funds for maintenance, protection, preserving, and monitoring of wilderness areas. It will also be beneficial for providing income and well-being to the local and indigenous population. And it will also support cultural enterprises and support micro businesses, otherwise that could have been disappearing. So I encourage you to discuss the challenges, certainties, and uncertainties of Arctic Ocean economy development, and to think about the question what we need for sustainable development of the Arctic Ocean economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. So from what you just said, I take it that basically what we're going to see in 2050 in the Arctic is going to become that the Arctic economy is the ocean economy. Is it right? Is it correct, what I heard?
To a large extent, yes.
To a large extent,
not completely.
Yeah. And I think that the whole notion of the Arctic economy, of the ocean economy, gives us a very complex view on the economic development, because it integrates everything from energy to tourism, from bioresources to climate solutions. And I think that this comprehensive approach should probably be the basis for the way how we see the Arctic economy development and how we work on it. Well, thank you very much, Alexandra. It was very insightful. And with this, I would like to invite Professor Frode Nielsen from Nord University Business School to offer his perspectives on the Arctic economy in the future. So please, Frode, the screen is yours.
Thank you, thank you. I will not bombard you with figures and numbers and stuff. I will rather take you through a reasoning about challenges and opportunities of the Arctic. The Arctic is a very generic expression, as you know, for a vast and diverse area. As a consequence, fundamental characteristics and challenges vary substantially whether you study North American Arctic or the North European/Russian Arctic. So to make the task a bit comprehensible, over 5 minutes for my disposal, I will focus on the European/West Russian Arctic in this short comment. One of the questions, or perhaps the key questions, that has been a constant field of interest over time is, what are the valuable resources in the Arctic? And are there still some yet to be discovered? This question has been raised over many centuries. Ever since the 15th century, expeditions have been set up to explore and study the Arctic, and many countries have been engaged in this effort: Germany, Russia, Norway, Sweden, Netherlands, Poland, and so I could go on for hours naming countries. It was, of course, quite a bit of adventurous spirit that was behind the expedition's thrust and drive. But an underlying element was always the search for new resources and unexploited opportunities in the uncharted waters and land in the high north. The huge natural resources were discovered, all from various fish species, sea mammals, and enormous mineral and fossil energy resources deposits. Some of the renewable biological resources was overexploited as technology overruled sense and resource management. Only thanks to a sharp introduction of strict management regimes, important sea mammals and fish species were saved. Herring, walrus, whales are examples of these ones. So over the past decades, the main concern and interest for the Arctic has shifted from resource mapping and exploitation towards preservation and coping with global warming consequences for Arctic life and subsistence. Thus, an additional dimension has been added to the concern and interest for the Arctic, and that is what will happen in the future Arctic, and what valuable resources should be left alone, and which one should or could be developed and exploited within the frames of a fully sustainable perspective. In this discussion, it will be very useful and also necessary to acknowledge and bear in mind that the climate situation in the Arctic is by and large a result of human activities that goes on in other, more highly populated areas far away from the Arctic. As we know, the Arctic has been and still is covered with ice and sits on top as a top shield of the vast marine areas of the North. Yes, we are aware that the escalating reduction of the polar ice and snow shield is on its way, but it has been significantly reduced, and by that made large ocean areas easier accessible for commercial activities, amongst others. So the accessible global oceans are now larger than ever before. In fact, the body of salt water covers approximately 71% of the surface of the Earth, the blue planet. A rhetorical question then, I couldn't resist, is how can it be possible that so little attention, relatively speaking, has been offered to a so important and large part of the globe? It may be high time now to bring much more of international politics, commercial, and scientific effort further towards a sustainable development of the blue economy. There are at least 3 factors that the blue economy may develop and thrive on in a sustainable manner: energy production and distribution, international trade and transportation, and increasing development of food and pharmaceutical production in and from the Arctic marine environment. It is my contention that it is high time not only to write and say, but also to think and act alternatively, away from soybean production, red meat, and so on, and rather look for more sustainable production drawn from the oceans and the Arctic seas. So therefore, 2 key questions need elaboration and significant attention in the years to come. Number 1 is, what sectors of the blue economy in the transforming Arctic have the greatest potential to serve global needs, and how can it be developed? Number 2 is, what are the opportunities and limitations for a strong increase in food production in the Arctic? Several initiatives have been taken to address these dimensions, of course, and over the fundamental questions. Among many, the EU recently launched a new Blue Economy Report 2021. So let me conclude this contribution by citing the EU Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, slightly rewritten though, but anyway, in these uncertain and challenging times, the blue economy is more relevant than ever. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Frode. And I especially like the when you said that sometime in the past we had the technology that overtook the sense. So we were faster in developing technologies than understanding the limitations to which we can use them. And today, when we hear a lot about the innovations, the pace of innovations, and when we see all the technological advancements around us, so we are kind of we have the same chance to get into the same trap, right? With all these technologies around us. So today it's more important than ever to think about the way how we, not about the way how we, what technologies we develop, but about the way how we use those technologies that already available for more sustainable future of the Arctic. Well, thank you very much. And hope we can go into deeper discussion afterwards, because there are so many points that you've raised that need to be elaborated, I think, and we're very much looking forward to the questions from the audience. But now I would like to give the floor to Mads Frederiksen from the Arctic Economic Council to share his perspectives on the future of the Arctic economy. So Mads, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me with such a good panel. I'm actually I'm inspired by a TED talk I once saw with Alexander Middleton by my first slides, which is if you decide to Google the Arctic, this is very much the imaging you get up. The same if you look at the Arctic strategies from different nations, this is the image you get. So this is what a quick Google search will tell you. But for us in the Arctic Economic Council, the Arctic region is a lot more than this. The Arctic region is a place of connectivities, of big cities, of small cities, renewable energy, vertical farming, beautiful nature, and all of this that we have already heard about, and opportunities. So in my 5 minutes, I will just speak a little bit about some of these opportunities. First of all, the Arctic Economic Council is the only pan-Arctic business organization in the region. So we are the only organization that speaks on behalf of all 8 Arctic states. We have members from all of these, but also from outside the Arctic. The Arctic that we call home and where we operate. I'm sure that we have all heard this message several times, and I think it would be unfair to be at COP26 and not acknowledge the fact that the temperatures are rising at 3 times the speed in the Arctic region. But as we have also heard, it's not from people, it's not because of emissions happening in the Arctic region. It comes from emissions, CO2 emissions outside the Arctic region. But it affects all of us. So it affects homes and it affects people living there, and it also affects companies. These are the roads you have to drive on when permafrost is doing its damage. You have rising energy costs. You have fishing habitats moving to new places, and it really is a challenge for companies. And I think what is important is that is also, you know, with all these challenges, there's also another challenge. So one is climate change. Another challenge here is the ideas that is coming from the south, outside of the Arctic, about how we should solve this. And we have already heard from the 2 previous speakers that the solution is quite often to make this protective national park rather than develop it. So you have climate change in the Arctic, and then to add on to those climate change, you have the ideas from other stakeholders saying, you know, we should close down all development. And I don't think that's the solution, because we have a lot of good solutions that we can help the rest of the world with in the Arctic. We have heard a lot about fish, and this decade will be the ocean decade. Today, I mean, I think it's very interesting, both what Alexander and what Frode was saying, how we need more of the fish, we need more of the resources from the oceans. Today, only 7% of people's protein intake comes from the seafood industry. And we will rise to 9.7 billion people in 2050. So we'll be a lot more people on this planet. there's a huge potential for more sustainable fishing rather than soybeans. With heating waters also comes new fishing habitats. So suddenly fish is moving further north. And this also offers both challenges and opportunities for the fishing sector. I think another important point here is that this is also a very highly regulated area. So all Arctic states have actually gone together on an agreement not to fish in the currently overfrozen oceans until we know how many fish stays below. So it's just to say that it's also a very regulated area, thankfully, and it's also a very sustainable area for sustainable fishing. Both speakers also spoke about the opportunities around innovation. What you see in this photo here is it comes from the cod, and it's worth a lot more money than a cod fillet. So this is from an Icelandic company that is using Kerecis, they're using fish skin to treat burn wounds, to treat diabetic skin wounds. So basically you put on this fish skin on the wound and the wound will heal in a more natural process. This right now is a multi-million-dollar industry in Iceland. In Iceland, where they're currently using more than 80% of the cod fillet, of the cod fish. As an example, in Norway, they're currently using around 56% of the fish. So there's a huge potential of what other nations throw out. You know, why don't we innovate? Why don't we use new technologies like both Frode and Alexander were saying? In North Norway, you also have companies working with the prawn shells, making heart medicine, and you have companies using cod liver to make a COVID-19 test. Another resource I think is important to talk about is the raw materials. What you see on this map is where the European Union gets their raw materials from. If you look at China, for example, we get a lot of raw materials, but 98% of the rare earth elements that we're using in Europe comes from China. You also have rare earth elements in Greenland. You also have rare earth elements in places of other places of the Arctic region. And I think there needs to be a decision in the Western world if we want to have raw materials like copper, iron, rare earth elements from one of the most responsible nations of the world, of the Arctic region, or we would rather continue having it, like you see on the map, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Where do people think we will have the most responsible mining? I would say that we will have it in the Arctic region. And why do we need these raw materials? We need these raw materials because if you want wind turbines and you want this green transition, we need batteries, and for batteries, you need the rare earth elements. You also need for other things. You need iron and copper and so on. So everything you need if you want satellites, you want electric vehicles, you want your cell phones, and you want your wind turbines, you need to explore minerals, and these minerals are in the Arctic region. And this is my final point is about the opportunities, is around energy. And I think I would like to take an example. You know, we have all kinds of energy sources in the Arctic. We have nuclear, oil, LNG, geothermal, tidal energy, etc., etc. But I would like to focus on the hydro energy because in northern Norway, there's a small village called Berlevåg. This is how Berlevåg looked after the war. Berlevåg later developed into a fishing village, but with the fishing industry was changing, suddenly people were leaving this village, so it went from 1,700 people to just 900 people today. And they looked at themselves in Berlevåg in North Norway and they said, you know, what do we have plenty of? What can people not take away from us? And what they realized, what people cannot take away from you is the wind. So they have a plan about building a power-to-X or ammonia plant. They already have the money for this. So this is not some kind of weird dream. This is a project that already has financed. So they want to create this power-to-X ammonia plant, which will be the future fuel. And they will use the surplus heat from this production to have on-land fish farms. And they will use the waste from the fish farms to have vertical farming. So suddenly you have vertical farming, you will have your own lettuce in Berlevåg, you will have your on-land fish farms with no pesticides and so on. It will be heated water of 27 degrees Celsius, so you can have hot water prawns like tiger prawns, and you will also provide green energy to the shipping industry and to Svalbard. So this is some of the opportunities that is already happening in the Arctic region. And this will definitely transform the shipping industry. And shipping industry has been a big part for the Arctic region for many years. This is one of my favorite maps of all times. This is the Vikings shipping routes, the trading routes of the Vikings in the year 700. So if you look in the year 700, we used to trade, the people of us living in the Arctic, we used to trade all across the oceans. The oceans are our highways, and the oceans connect 85% of the world's population. So even though we're just a small group of people, or 4 million people, or 10 million people, depending how you count, we have the opportunity to connect the whole world. We have, for the first time in history now, we have a new ocean opening up, or for the first time in recorded history. When the ice melts, the Arctic Ocean will open up, and it will offer opportunities both within fishing, but also within shipping and transport logistics. We will have to travel shorter distances, which means that we will save on CO2 emissions. So at the end, my final comment here is that we've just gone through a pandemic, or we're going through a pandemic right now. And we never had a time in history where people have gone out of a crisis and continued the same way as it was before. You know, you never leave a pandemic or a plague or a war coming out the same way as you was before. You look at yourself and you reform and transform. I think we are currently going through the climate change challenges, and we are going through a pandemic, and we have to change the way we are doing business. And the way we are doing business is through innovation, and is looking to where we can get the resources the smartest possible way. And I would say the smartest way to get renewable energy, to get the raw materials we need, and to get the food we need to feed the world is in the Arctic region. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Mads. It was fantastic. I especially liked when you said that, well, sometimes in the Arctic we receive good ideas from the south, but perhaps we need Arctic ideas for the development of the Arctic, not the southern ideas, right? And I think it's a very strong and very strong statement saying that we have in the Arctic, we do not only have natural resources like oil and gas and things like that, but we also have enough human capital to generate the innovations, the ideas for the future of the Arctic. And some of the examples you've given about that cod skin that cures the wounds and other things, and that ammonia plant, that's fantastic. So I think that we just need to admit that there are a lot of ideas that just wait to be implemented there, and the ideas that will transform the Arctic for the future. So basically, it's not the climate that transforms the Arctic, but the ideas. And thank you very much, Mads, again for that. We will come back to your points, but I've been told that we are receiving some questions from from our online viewers. So I would like to read the question and offer all the panelists to respond. So the first question is from Darka Todorovsky from the media outlet Poglet Info. So basically the question is that we obviously need some policies and rules of the game in the Arctic. And the question is whether there will be those rules that regulate how the Arctic is being developed in a sustainable way. And whether the question is whether there will be a confrontation between, I don't know why it says Russia and China on one side and Scandinavia, USA and Canada on the other side. Well, I mean, here is the couple of questions, actually. I think one question is about the rules of the game, and the other question is the Arctic only for the Arctic states, or is it for everyone? So I encourage all of the panelists to respond to that. So who's ready?
I can start out then,
please,
before
please.
The two researchers. I think there's good questions here. First of all, the Arctic region is not a lawless area. I think that it's not the Wild Wild West. I mean, we have each nation state has their laws. You have the Polar Code, which is quite unique. You have the regulations on UNCLOS happening in a very formal ways. So that I think that's the rules of the game are very clear. And happens through the Arctic Council, happens in the IMO, in the UN, in the European Union, depending on the authorities. And then regarding the conflict, I always use the example of LNG. So on the Northern Sea Route, you have ships sailing there that has been designed in Finland. They have been constructed in South Korea. It's French investors who are investing. The energy is being exploited in Russia. Is going to China and is also going to Norway. So you basically have, and this is just one LNG project that is so international. So business has an interest in free trade, open borders, and collaboration. So the conflict is definitely not going to come from the business side. I cannot speak about the political side. And then if the Arctic is open for involvement for other people, I think the key here is in the mining field, we talk about social license to operate. I think if policymakers wants to get involved in the Arctic, they need a social license to operate there politically. And that has to come through involvement and dialogue with the people. I used to say that in the Arctic regions, nothing about us without us. So if you want to deal with the Arctic region, you should do it with the people in the Arctic region. Thank you.
That's Alexandra, Frode. Any further comments on the question?
I can.
Yes, please, Frode.
Well, I'm a professor, so I'm used to talk for hours. But I mean, the thing is, as it was pointed out here, is I don't believe in terrible confrontations. On the contrary, because all nation states need some kind of a trade, and there is always some kind of a trade balance. And we have international institutions such as the WTO that can regulate. But I think basically trade will emerge based on common interests from all the parties involved and all the parties that are interested in doing something good, some business or whatever development. So I'm not so afraid about any confrontation, basically. I think we should rather look for opportunities and how it can be moderated so that it is carried out in a sustainable and good manner in the future. And there are so many opportunities in the Arctic, so many, and we are just in the beginning of taking advantage of all this, but we have to do it carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frode. Alexandra, are you willing to add to this?
Yeah, I'd like to add just quickly that Mads didn't mention, but in the Arctic Economic Council, they actually have Arctic Investment Protocol, which is a soft law mechanism for all investors that want to invest in the Arctic and do it in socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable way. And this provides a blueprint of 6 principles, what you like a checkbox, what you need to do before you want to invest in the Arctic. And utmost important is to consult with the local population, indigenous people, and see how your project can contribute to the well-being and economic development of the region, how it will create jobs and prosperity to the region, not to take, but actually to meaningfully contribute. So
thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you very much, everyone. So basically, the answer is let the business lead the way and follow the rules of sustainable development, because basically there is no conflict around the business. Business has a lot of interest in the way in using the opportunities that are there in the Arctic, and the business by definition is international. So basically, if we follow the business interests and make sure that the rules of the game are there in terms of the sustainable development. So some of the frameworks have already been in place. So basically, we just need to start working towards the specific projects and initiatives and rely on business to do so. Thank you very much again. We've got another question from online. It's from Modern Diplomacy. So I will read it out loud. So is it possible for countries that aspire to the space and resources of the Arctic to find a common language and spheres of interest? Or do you expect that things will be resolved in other places in the world? If you had the opportunity, how would you mediate among the countries that are territorially connected to the important area? So basically the question again is about how the countries can agree on the way how to use the opportunities of the Arctic, and can we do it in the Arctic, or do we need somebody else to sort this out for us? So please, I don't know if anyone wants to comment, so please do.
Let the professor start. Frode, I will let you start.
Frode, please.
Yes, I'd rather not say so much about this. It is a difficult field, you know, of landmines and all this kind of other stuff that you can step on. But I think basically we need to adhere to national and international laws and regulations and agreements. And I think by doing that, it wouldn't be such a difficult task. There are, of course, people who want to dispute agreements, international agreements from time to time, but I think that wouldn't be a big problem. If we open up for development projects, there will be room for everyone, I think, and I do not see this as a difficult field. Actually, it's just to comply with the overarching regulations and laws and social commitments. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that. Mats, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think now people are always talking about Russia and the US as two opposites, and if you look at it at the International Space Station, they collaborate very well. You know, they are sending astronauts and cosmonauts into space, and they work together. And the same goes for the Arctic. You have the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, that is a collaboration. I actually see the Arctic as rather being a zone of conflict. It's a zone of collaboration. You know, my chairman is from Russia, and we have a lot of US members, and it has never been an issue. So you have, as Frode said, you have a lot of regulations already. There is no conflicts around resources. I mean, when it comes to the territorial disputes, it's solved in the UN. So it's not really. We haven't seen a conflict in the Arctic region.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mats. Alexandra, would you like to add to this?
Yes, I'd like to highlight that cooperation on the Arctic Council front has been very successful, and it's devoted to environmental protection and sustainable development of the Arctic. And we also shouldn't forget about the role of international investors that are more increasingly requiring climate risk assessment and reporting in accordance with Task Force on Climate Reporting Disclosures. All big companies in the UK will be required to report their climate risks. So we also have the pressure from international investors community and pension funds that are regulating the market. And some of the companies in the Arctic have one of the best track records for investors in that aspect.
Thank you very much. So again, I think that we're all agree that the political frameworks are there and they are pretty operational. So we don't see the geopolitical tensions on the extent that wouldn't allow us to work, right? And one thing that I notice in many discussions that we were holding over the course of the years, that the closer to the Arctic you get with this kind of discussion, the less political component is there, the more business and social perspectives are in the focus. And sometimes for the rest of the world, which is in the south, as the big south, they think that we have tensions, but we have opportunities, right, rather than tensions. And I think that, from what you say, I take it that the important frameworks that we need to work on in the future are mainly about the way how we invest, how we attract more businesses to the Arctic, and how we make sure that those businesses who come to the Arctic, they work sustainably, they bring their best technologies, and they also bring their common sense in front of the technologies to make sure that the technologies are used with sense, right? So I think that the regulation which has been recently introduced, this not that recently, a few years ago, the Arctic Investment Protocol is a very good stepping stone for better investment environment, better investment climate in the Arctic, and I think that this is something we need to continue working on. Well, thank you very much. And so far, we do not have any more questions online, so I'll probably ask you to touch upon some of the points you mentioned in your presentations, and probably we could elaborate on them a little more, because there were so many good points. And Frode, if you don't mind, I would like to start with your point about the question that you suggested. What sectors of the blue economy have the greatest potential on the course of the next 30 years? So in your view, what are those sectors? So obviously we can guess a number of them, but what do you see from your perspective? Please.
Yes, thank you. There are many interesting areas, but I think one of the areas is simply aquaculture. Aquaculture of fish, marine substances such as alga, macroalga, and microalga, and all these kind of things. And the sea is so packed with interesting and valuable substances. You can cure cancer, you can cure just about anything by exploiting all this, but we do not actually have the technology and skill set. So the need, strangely enough, it will come from a professor, that we need some more funding for research. But anyway, it is actually necessary. We need to put in an extra effort, right, to raise the technology level and to be able to economically exploit all the, or at least some of the vast possibilities that are just outside of our hands here. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Mads, if you were asked to name like 3 top sectors in the Arctic economy to 2050, the ones that you would invest your dollars into, what would that be?
I mean 2050. So I mean, we have already, the two academics have already mentioned it, and I think everyone knows that the blue economy, and here I'm talking the blue bioeconomy. So it's both looking at algae, it's looking at seaweed, it's looking at, the resources we haven't exploited yet, that we don't know yet in fully details. So anything around, the seafood and the seafood industry, I will definitely invest in. I think, secondly, there's a lot about energy in the Arctic. So we know there's going to be a decarbonization of shipping. We know that shipping fuels will be running on new kind of energies in the future, if it's e-methanol, ammonia, whatever. But anything around energy, I think will be good investments, definitely. And then there needs to be investments in, and this might be a public investment, but it's a good investment in 2050, is around connectivity. So it's around making sure that people living in remote communities have access to the internet, so they can suddenly work online. It means that the hospitals can operate online. If you look at the world at 2050, a lot of things will be automated. There will be robotics, there will be artificial intelligence doing a lot of things, but we need that data, we need proper connectivity. So that's both subsea cables, it's low Earth orbiting satellites, it's large satellites and so on, but we need to invest in the connectivity. So the first two is more for private investors, and the last one is definitely a public-private investment opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's cool. Alexandra, please, your top three sectors for investment in Arctic.
Actually, I can't agree more with what Frode brought up, because what we see our Arctic now is just the image of the Arctic as a producer of raw material, that would be used somewhere else. But once this raw material start to be developed and put into final products already in the Arctic, it will create so much more additional value that will be beneficial for the local communities. So health supplements from fish, from algae, from the ocean. I would also bet on connectivity, as Matt said, because during the times of pandemics, we all witnessed, it doesn't matter where you live, you can do your work remotely, but you can attract a lot of people and talent to the Arctic because we have a lot of space, a lot of nature, recreational capital. And once we have proper working networks, proper working internet, this becomes it becomes a very attractive place for the talent to come and live in the Arctic, to develop the region.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that one of the things that are beyond obvious in this discussion is that the Arctic bioresources, be it fish or marine organisms like or seaweed, for example, they are not only for food purposes but also for pharmaceutical, and I think that and probably many others as well, right? Because we still don't know. I especially liked the figure that was in the Alexandra's presentation, that we currently the level of to which we know the ocean is only about 2 to 5%. So basically, we know nothing about the ocean, and there's still a lot of discoveries to be done. And actually, yes, and I think that as the research will be done in the future, we will see not only new forms of life, new resources, but also we will discover new ways how to use those resources. Just like the example that Mads gave us about the cod skin, right? And I think that there will be more and more opportunities like that. And I also think that I don't know if any one of you would like to comment on this. I heard that the Arctic Ocean is very capable of the climate initiatives like carbon sequestering, like you can use the seaweed in the artificially grown seaweed in the Arctic to absorb the CO2 from the atmosphere. So what do you think about that? I heard that these projects are have been explored, but are there any practical implementations like that?
I think there are some. They haven't come through fully with the technology and the knowledge, but it is in process, and it is like the rainforest. You know, it just sits in the sea instead, and it's absolutely capable of taking care of huge amounts of CO2. But there are still some work to be done in order to draw in a more large scale on these fantastic ideas. But you know, on one side, it is a terrible situation. I'm very bad at that myself with patience. So there need to be some patience, but we need also to step on it to get ahead with the inventions and innovations and all this. And that is fund needing to do this efforts.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think that yeah, we just need to release the creative energy of the people in the Arctic, bring more talents online, and so that they could also innovate from other parts of the world, but for the innovations that we can use in the Arctic. And yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think that the other point that was like echoing from between all of your three presentations is about the transportation and the opportunities that are opening up with the melting ice and the opportunities to for the global transit through the Arctic waters. So, but what are the conditions with which we can consider this transportation sustainable? What do you like? Because you've mentioned already, Mads, that the ammonia would probably be the marine fuel of the future, and we will definitely look into more new alternative fuels to what's been used now. But what are other conditions? Or maybe you could expand on the alternative fuels perspective as well.
I think there's several layers to this. So one is, if you take the Northern Sea route, it's a shorter route, it's a shorter distance. So in the long run, it releases less CO2 emissions over time, depending, of course, how far south you go in Asia. I think that's an important caveat as well. But it has a potential. Right now, there's not much transit shipping. I think last year was 63 ships sailing through the Northern Sea route. You have 21,000 ships sailing through the Suez Canal. So there's still a potential. But for it to be sustainable, it needs, I mean, also to be environmentally sustainable. So that means, you know, taking care of the noise and so on for these new shipping routes. The good thing about nuclear is it's not as noisy. Then you have other issues like search and rescue. So it has to be humanly sustainable as well. So the search and rescue capability needs to be improved. And then the fuel. So LNG, of course, is better than oil and diesel. And right now the LNG carriers run on cargo. They run on LNG. And then sustainable, I think another important point here is sustainability for the local communities living along the Northern Sea route and along any Arctic shipping routes. I think you have an opportunity, or we have an opportunity as a society, to develop the shipping routes and include the local communities. So, for example, it will be easier to get reindeer meat to the international markets. It will be easier to get wild berries or get local products made in the small, remote indigenous communities if the ships goes in and stop. So if we decide to invest in hydrogen, e-methanol or ammonia or whatever it will be, the power to X, the unknown X, if we decide to invest in that, we will most likely have to refuel more often than today. So we will have to stop in, and when we are stopping in here, why don't we add on some of the local products? So sustainability, I think, covers a lot of fields. So it's both the climate, it's the environment, it's the social aspect. But I think we are getting a long way, and I think we have as everyone else have said, is that the Arctic has a good track record for this. We just need to make it human sustainable as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mats. Frode, if you like to add on that.
No, I think it's okay. Basically, it is. I think that Mats made a good presentation of the
Sure.
comment on this issue. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be necessary. I could always talk about that, but I mean, it is the fueling of transportation is a critical issue, of course it is. But there are many good initiatives which we raised, and I mean also the search and rescue capacity has been significantly improved over the past 5-10 years. But of course, it needs some more effort, I would say. But and the collaboration, I was actually in the exercise between Russia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, at least, and it was very interesting and encouraging to see how good they collaborated. They stood side by side and solved challenges all the time, and it was really good. And they have these exercises annually at sea between Norway and Russia, and we have other land-based exercises, and I think they steadily improve the search and rescue capability. The challenge is, of course, again, funding, because as the traffic increase, the capacity need to be increased as well. And this is something to think about also. So there must be a kind of a balance, for governmental initiatives and follow-up. You cannot solely rely on private economic actors.
Yeah.
So they need facilitation, yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Frode. Alexandra, would you like to add on this?
I could add that the Russian Federation government has very ambitious plans for financing of the Northern Sea route and many initiatives for improving safety, investing into icebreaker capacity, into new vessels operating, also offering container shipment along the Northern Sea route that will be very attractive in the future for more prompt, like just-in-time type of shipping of materials without going through Suez Channel, which is very congested. So this will all require a lot of investment, both from the Russian side and also from international investors that would need to update their fleet that will be suitable to operate in the icy waters on the Northern Sea route. And it's a unique opportunity now to think of using most sustainable technology, best fuels possible, and then using this very short route to serve the customers, to use it more in the transit way, not just destinational way as it is used nowadays. But I see this transition, this kind of transition to shipping all year round with very sustainable shipping capabilities on the Northern Sea route.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. So, yeah, I think that it's critical indeed that when you talk about the logistics and transportation in the Arctic, it's one of those maybe one of those few areas where you can not only rely on business alone, you need to cooperate between business and governments because this is a critical part of the critical infrastructure and it involves a lot of government interests and regulation as well. And I think that, yes, if we succeed in creating that supportive an enabling environment from the policy perspective, we will have a very competitive sea route that will contribute its bit to the global trade, and that's going to be fantastic. And also, I think that the point that Mats made on that. You will have to think about making more stops on that Arctic transit route, and that what's gonna integrate the local communities in the Arctic with the rest of the world. And it's not only because you need to fuel up more often, but also because you really need to use the economic potential of the indigenous peoples in the Arctic and get them connected to the global economy. And I think that with this point, it's natural to think about and to discuss. We have already mentioned that Arctic has its own talents, Arctic has its own ideas, and Arctic people should be a part of the solutions and for the Arctic now and in 2050. But let's talk a little bit, who are these people in the Arctic? Who are they? Because sometimes we, as Matt's shown the slides, we see no people in the pictures. When you Google Arctic, it's only polar bears and that's it. So no people. But who are the people in the Arctic? So what are their expectations and what are their aspirations? So who would like to start on this?
Maybe I could start because
Yes,
it's interesting. No, every time I speak with companies from anywhere in the Arctic, so that's in North Norway, Northern Sweden, Russia, Alaska, anywhere, one of their main issues is not as much investments as is people. Is attracting the right workforce is a huge challenge for companies. It's a challenge for companies around the world, also in Moscow and Paris and Washington is also an issue, but especially in the Arctic region, to make sure that people are staying there, that people are not leaving the region is the key. And I think the problem is that we probably have focused for too long just about creating jobs, without saying, people also have other reasons to be in a place than just working. There's also a life after work, but if you read the policies, it's always about job creations. It's not about creating the livelihoods. It's not about the 16 other hours when you're not working. So competences is really key. We need to have the right competences. And the region is so sparsely populated that we are very open for outsiders. We are very welcoming to outsiders to come and work. And we need to skilled people. And I also think there's also a gender issue here that I'm sure a lot of the researchers can speak more about. But there's disparity in some parts of the Arctic about who is the most highly educated and so on. So we need to lift everyone, and both male and females. And we need to make sure the young people has a motivation to stay there. Other than just working. So that's the first step. I would also say, if you can live in the Arctic, I mean, you can live everywhere, I would say. I mean, and that really says a lot about the people who comes from the Arctic. It's a very strong, resilient people. They have been living in some of the harshest environment for hundreds of years. So by nature, there's also a lot of innovation going on in the Arctic, and you need to be innovative. You need to be collaborative. You need to work with your neighbors, and this is very much in the nature of the Arctic. So there was a famous explorer, Icelandic American explorer, who wrote a book called The Friendly Arctic. And the reason why he called it the Friendly Arctic, he said the Arctic is very, very friendly if you know how to live there. If you don't know how to treat the Arctic, it's a very unfriendly place. But if you know how to live and work in the Arctic, it's a very, very friendly place. And I think the people living in the Arctic knows how friendly it is. And I think we just need to showcase that to the rest of the world.
Thank you very much, Mats. Alexandra, would you like to continue?
Sure, I have studied quite a lot demographic dynamics in both Norwegian, Swedish, and Finnish Arctic, and also Northern West Russian Arctic. And we see quite worrying signs there, because the population of youth is decreasing all the time, and the population of young adults is also decreasing. And the only population that is increasing is elderly people that would require a lot of attention there is a very high dependency ratios in the economy that will create a lot of strain on the economy as well, taking care of elderly and young children. So I guess the most important part in this equation is to solve how to bring more people that will create families and continue that will create a positive trend in demographics in the Arctic. But speaking also of educational attainment, we see that women are much more educated than male. So they usually it's the other way around, but in the Arctic we see these disparities. So there needs to be more attention to bring in more higher education for our male population. Some remote areas of the Arctic have very high sex ratios, meaning that there is much more male dominant society, like proportion wise, than female. So this creates a certain social challenges for their society. So basically, I credit to many things that Mads also said. I once read one survey made for Russian graduates, and they were asked, what will make you to move to the Arctic? And it was not the level of salary. The most important one was that the place would have a gym, so they want to go and exercise, have some opportunities to live out of the work as well. So that's very important to think
Right.
when we build the Arctic, what kind of urban environment and cultural and recreational opportunities we create for the people in the Arctic.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Frode, any remarks from you on this perspective, please?
It will be very much on the same lines as Mats and Alexandra, but I think interesting jobs is important. And you also need some minimum level of infrastructure. I can give you an example from a small community in northern Norway where they have this relatively big aquaculture industry. And they wanted a new marketing director. They interviewed several people, and one of them said he would come, but he was so fond of tennis, he needed a tennis court. So they did, of course, not have one, but they just built one inside, and it didn't cost a fortune. And then he was employed. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but a bit more seriously, I think perhaps we might need to accept in the future that there will be some kind of a change, demographic change, that we can't populate all these small villages scattered around everywhere. Maybe there will be some kind of a concentration. It's only a guess. I mean, but I think probably. I mean, let's say 50 years ago, no one complained about the weather in northern Norway because they didn't have a TV. Mm-hmm. But now they can see every day the fantastic weather they can experience elsewhere. But I mean, people are different. I mean, you can find people interested in nature, going for fishing. I'm a fly fisherman myself, and I really enjoy that. And they have a lot of opportunities around here. So, but maybe the main key issue is a minimum level of infrastructure, and you need a critical number of people, and so that interesting jobs also appears. And I think we need to perhaps accept that there will be some kind of a demographic change in the future.
Thank you very much. Well, I think this is a very good note to conclude the discussion. And I would like to say that based on what we've just discussed, we see that in 2050, the Arctic will be creative, it will be friendly, it will have a lot of new talent brought from other parts of the world, as well as those born in Arctic. And we will see the future economy of the Arctic predominantly built around the notion of the blue economy, with such sectors as bioresources, energy, and also leading the way, but also it's about the connectivity and connectedness of the Arctic, not only physically through the new opening up transit routes, but also through the digital connectivity that brings people together. And well, I think with this kind of a vision for the Arctic, we can definitely engage more businesses and more people from different ways of life to contribute to this sustainable and friendly future of the Arctic. Thank you very much. I would like to thank again our wonderful panelists, Alexander Middleton, Mads Frederiksen, and Frode Nielsen, for their contribution today. Thank you very much for being with us, and have a good rest of your day. And I would like to say that unfortunately, the Russian speaker could not join us for the discussion today, but luckily we have a pre-recorded address from him that we will offer to watch now. So please.
Dear colleagues, friends, and all the guests of Russian Pavilion who are participating both on site and online, I warmly welcome you today at the Arctic Day in the framework of the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. In 2021-23, the Russian Federation is chairing the Arctic Council, a key format for constructive multilateral cooperation in the High North. For a quarter of a century, despite the complexity of global affairs in other areas, the 8 Arctic states and Arctic indigenous peoples have sat together at the same table, working towards achieving our shared goals. The challenges the Arctic faces are numerous and evolving rapidly, and there is not one nation or entity that can mitigate these challenges alone. We therefore chose the Russian chairmanship to operate under the theme Responsible Governance for Sustainable Arctic, reflecting the need for collective action on the sustainable development of the region in a balanced combination of environmental, economic, and social components. Climate change has a significant and rapid impact on the Arctic, which is warming 3 times faster than the rest of the world. Therefore, in addition to the tasks of addressing climate change issues, adapting livelihoods, enhancing resilience to its effects, maintaining the health of Arctic ecosystems, including the marine environment, and preserving biodiversity, in particular migratory bird species, we need to give urgent attention to managing environmental risks. All of these tasks require collective efforts of all Arctic Council states. We are sure that sustainable development is the core element on the way to reduction of environmental risks in the Arctic that promotes a responsible approach to the development of the Northern Territories. Russia is very keen to move in this direction. At the same time, it is important not only to be mindful of the Arctic's vulnerability in the face of climate change, but also to use its natural energy and transport potential and solutions to facilitate the transition to low-emission economy. This will contribute to fulfilling the goals of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We intend to encourage the widespread introduction of advanced innovation technologies in industry, transport, and energy, including the development of renewable energy sources. I would also like to stress the enormous role of the Arctic in transition towards climate-neutral economy. Arctic not only has a huge hydrocarbon resources like LNG, which is in great demand due to energy transition, but also minerals and metals for low-carbon future, including rare earth metals. Understanding how climate change will affect the climate system and ecosystem is a key to adapting livelihoods and to inform decision-making on regional, national, and international levels. The Council's 6 working groups, which tackle a broad range of the Arctic's most pressing issues, regularly develop world-class environmental, ecological, and social assessments that provide us with the scientific and science and evidence-based knowledge that inform our decision-making. The development and application of practical green energy solutions in the Arctic region enables communities to reduce emissions and improve air quality. The Arctic Council promotes knowledge exchange and supports small and remote Arctic communities in transitioning to sustainable energy. Resilience is the capacity of communities and systems to recover and restore themselves from crises and disturbances. Governments, indigenous peoples, local communities, researchers, and businessmen are therefore working together to build resilience to the social ecological changes that are underway in the Arctic. And it's a cross-cutting theme across the Arctic Council working groups. Black carbon both damages human health and contributes to climate change. Arctic Council projects seek to reduce black carbon and its sources and improve understanding its impacts on Arctic inhabitants. Wildfires and wildland fires are an emerging topic across Arctic Council working groups, as the environmental and communities in the circumpolar north have been affected by unprecedented wildfires over the past few years. Arctic states and permanent participants provide specific expertise for a holistic approach on how to tackle future wildfire seasons. The Russian chairmanship of the Arctic Council is planning to organize a series of events on climate change and permafrost degradation in the Arctic, prevention of marine and land pollution, including oil spill prevention and response, emergency response and management exercise. There are also plans to hold the third Arctic Biodiversity Congress, meeting of ministers responsible for environmental protection and heads of meteorological services. Having that, I would like to share with you the following statement of the chair of senior Arctic officials on the occasion of the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the parties COP26 in Glasgow. As the current chair of the Arctic Council, the Russian Federation has prepared this statement on the occasion of the United Nations Climate Change Conference of the parties in Glasgow. The Arctic states and indigenous permanent participants of the Arctic Council recently shared their vision for the Arctic over the next decade that recognizes the region's particular vulnerability to rapid warming and outlines strategic actions to tackle climate change. For the past 50 years, the Arctic has warmed at a rate 3 times the global average. Global anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases and short-lived climate pollutants continue to increase and drive climate change. These alarming changes have severe consequences for biodiversity, ecosystems, and human living conditions in the Arctic, including direct negative impacts on health and well-being, food security, transportation, livelihoods, industries, infrastructure, and the availability of safe drinking water. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recently concluded that human influence has unequivocally warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. Their Climate Change 2021 report showed that emissions of greenhouse gases from human activities are responsible for approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius of warming globally over the past 100 years. Further warming is expected to reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming, which will amplify permafrost thawing and the loss of seasonal snow cover, melting of glaciers and ice sheets, and loss of summer Arctic sea ice. To reduce emissions of greenhouse gases and short-lived climate pollutants and slow the rate of increase in average temperature, it's of utmost importance to step up efforts to meet the long-term temperature goals and effective implementation of Paris Agreement. The Arctic Council is therefore firmly committed to work alongside other countries under the UNFCCC to reach, as a matter of urgency, the goals of the Paris Agreement. Established 25 years ago, the Arctic Council continues to play a strong leadership role in highlighting the environmental, cultural, and societal implications of climate change for Arctic inhabitants, with a particular emphasis on indigenous peoples. The Council will contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation by promoting efforts towards low-emission societies and environmental protection throughout the Arctic. The Arctic states support efforts to increase capacity of all Arctic communities to adapt to climate change and encourage further work to identify and share best practices to deal with these challenges. Recent Arctic Council scientific assessments, including the Arctic Climate Change Update 2021 and the Report on the State of Arctic Terrestrial Biodiversity, found that climate change is the most serious threat to Arctic biodiversity and ecosystem. The Arctic Council has also highlighted the imperative of reducing short-lived climate pollutants to slow near-term warming and provide climate and health benefits for Arctic inhabitants. To address the growing impacts of climate change and pollution in the Arctic states have been working through a dedicated, action-oriented expert group to achieve black carbon and methane reduction in the Arctic region. Arctic states are on track to reach our collective goal of reducing black carbon emissions by 25-33% relative to 2013 levels by 2025. However, we note that additional action and measures are needed to reverse the trend of growing collective methane emissions, which have increased by 2% from 2013 to 2018 and are projected to continue increasing to 2025. The Arctic Council will continue to undertake activities based on sound science together with traditional knowledge and local knowledge to advance our understanding and inform our actions on climate change. This includes working closely with the international community, especially Arctic Council observer states and organizations, to address climate change effects in the Arctic that not only impact Arctic nations, but also are of significant concern globally. Thank you.